Time for Odin video part 2. So, this video is going to cover pretty much from when Odin leaves Wano, or just before that when Whitebeard shows up, all the way up until when he returns after, him and the Roger Pirates find Laugh-Tale. So, that's what I'll be going over in this video today. So, by the time everything happens when Whitebeard shows up, Odin is already the daimyo of Curry. He has got a good chunk of actually pretty much all of the scabbards are now around him in some shape or form. In the case of, he's gathered all of them. And, they've all kind of, worked on improving themselves, making themselves more respectable so they can be better at representing Odin, out in Wano and everything like that. Odin has made up with his father, but Odin still, of course, has this great desire to go out and see the world, to go beyond the shores of Wano and everything like that. And what basically happens is one day, about a year after everything happens with Odin's father, when, they're just, where they get to talk for one more time, Odin ends up hearing that there's been a ship, a pirate ship specifically, that has landed at Itachi Port. And Odin just charges towards Itachi Port at that point in time, and he just comes directly into conflict at first with Whitebeard. And it's like, he's never heard of this man, never met him, nothing like that. He's a random pirate that just somehow washed up on the shores of Wano. And Odin is literally like, runs in, swords blazing, clashes with Whitebeard, and is like, let me join your crew. It's like, back off, dude. And it's just, we get to see this clash between the two of them. It kind of shows, kind of at that time, how strong both of them are, given, we have the idea of, how strong Whitebeard becomes in his old age and everything else. And, he was a Yonko for a very long time. By this point in time, we've kind of, heard a little bit about the Rocks Pirates and everything. So we kind of know that he was part of this big powerhouse crew beforehand and everything. And what ends up happening is they clash. And then I guess they fight for a little while, and then, they stop fighting, and then, the retainers show up, all of Odin's retainers show up, and they end up, having this big feast with Whitebeard's crew at this point in time, which has, young Marco, and Jozu, and, Whitey Bay, and, all these other ones that are there that are part of the crew that later on will either be commanders or commanders of allied crews. The crews that are allied with Whitebeard. So it's kind of nice seeing, young versions of all of them. And, and kind of one of the ways that we get, a good explanation of this, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is Odin's journal. And, what we kind of get explained to us is that, while Odin was traveling around Wano, he had this journal that he kept with him because he wanted to have, a logbook, because he'd heard that, sailors and pirates and stuff like that in the outside world, they had logbooks that they, tracked their journeys in. And Odin kind of did the same thing, and this is how we kind of get, a bunch of this information later on, is because we hear about it from the logbook, and we know that later on Yamato has the logbook, and that's how Yamato knows so much about Odin's adventures, is because he's read it in the logbook like his Bible. And so kind of what we get is one of these, one of the things that Odin writes about is that it was a world I'd never seen, cold and heat like I'd never experienced. Plants, animals, people, strength, ideas, everything was new and different. Every day my old illusions were shattered. Everything surpassed my imaginations. I was so small. I only knew a tiny piece of the world. And that is, that's kind of Odin's summarizing to a degree of everything that he saw out in the world, everything that he experienced when he did leave Wano, when he left with the Whitebeard pirates. non-consensually on the Whitebeard pirate's part, or at least on Whitebeard's part. And so basically, what ends up happening is that over the course of the next 2 weeks, Oden just continually keeps asking Whitebeard again and again and again and again to let him join the crew. And, and Whitebeard is just like, no, no, no. And he's doing it because he's like, well, first of all, you're very headstrong in this regard. Second of all, you're the prince of this country, and I don't really need to be, because, Kinemon told Whitebeard this. And he's like, I don't really need to be sought after by your government for trying to, quote-unquote, kidnap their prince. And, which is fair, and understandable. And Whitebeard has always given off a little bit more level-headedness to a degree than Roger has. Type of a thing. But, so it's just like they spend kind of the next 2 weeks partying and everything like that. And, the Whitebeard pirates getting to know the, Oden and the retainers and everything like that. And they have this nice time and everything. And, Oden keeps asking, Whitebeard keeps saying no. And it gets to the point where it is now time for the Whitebeard pirates to leave. Any repairs have been made on their ship. They've been restocked, type of a thing. They probably haven't gone too far outside of, the port area, simply just because of the fact of, they're outsiders in Wano, and maybe some other people showed up. Because, at this point in time, I think Suru and Kinemon are married, I think, at this point in time. So, Suru may have met Whitebeard. That would be an interesting, thing to find out if Suru has met Whitebeard. Suru the Marine has interacted with Whitebeard, I think, but that's different. But what ends up happening is, it's time for the Whitebeard pirates to leave, and they decide to try to leave in the dead of night. So that way they're less likely to have Oden try to come with them. And good plan, doesn't work. As they're leaving, Oden, followed by Izo, comes running out of the forest by the Itachi port and ends up jumping after them as they are going, and he grabs onto this chain that is hanging off the back of the ship. That is the chain for the anchor. And he grabs onto that, and he's got Izo is grabbed onto Oden's back trying to stop Izo because Kinemon was trying to has told Whitebeard, try to leave in the middle of the night so Oden's less likely to follow you. And so they're, attempted plan didn't work. And Oden is just hanging onto the back of the ship with, hanging onto the chain on the back of the ship. And Whitebeard is kind of because the rest of the crew really want Oden to join. They managed to haul Izo aboard. And they kind of tie Izo up in the corner because, Izo is yelling at Whitebeard, which is so funny given the relationship we know that Whitebeard and Izo have later on. And what ends up happening is, Whitebeard looks at Oden, who's still hanging on the back of the ship on the chain, and is just fine, if you can hold on to that chain for 3 days as we are sailing and not let go, I will allow you to join the crew. And what ends up happening is, this is kind of a test for Oden anyway. And, Whitebeard's not going to let Oden drown or anything like that. But, Oden's hanging on to the back of the ship for the next, 3 days. And about 10 minutes shy, with about 10 minutes left of his goal, Oden hears a woman scream, hears a woman in trouble. And this might be a combination of just his, observation hockey being really good, and he's able to sense that, or something like that. And he hears this, this woman in trouble, and he lets go of the chain, and he ends up drifting to this island. And at this point in time, he is so waterlogged and bloated, and everything from random fish and stuff hitting him in the face, and everything like that, for just hanging onto the back of the ship for 3 days. And he ends up rising out of the water by this beach where these kidnappers are trying to capture this woman. And he ends up scaring the crap out of him because he looks I think they refer to him as an umibozu. a sea beast, a sea monster, a sea god, and they're just like terrified of him and they run away. And he like saves the woman. This woman, of course, is Toki. And then like he saves her, and then he just kind of collapses on the beach and kind of like shrinks back to normal, I guess, just because logic. And she kind of like takes care of him for like the next day or so. And what ends up happening is, he wakes up and he's like, ends up, talking to the woman, and, he saved her from from Karma and his crew of kidnappers at the time and everything. And, they kind of talk a little bit, Oden and Toki kind of talk a little bit. And then the Whitebeard pirates show up at the island, and Whitebeard figures out that the reason Oden let go was because he was going to go save Toki. And that is actually the decision. That is the factor that makes the difference in Whitebeard letting Oden join the crew or not. Is because Oden could have just, hung on for dear life and ignored the screams of this woman, or, ignored the terror of this woman that he felt or heard, and just continued on and, like, all of that. But he didn't. He gave up his chance and he went and he saved her, which is very much this, very good definition of what Oden does, of the man that Oden has become. Before, since the Harem Revolt days. And what ends up happening is, of course, that's when Whitebeard does allow Oden to actually join the crew and everything. And it also results in them finding out that Toki is actually trying to make her way to Wano, which, of course, neither Oden nor Whitebeard are particularly interested in going back because they just left Wano, but Toki stays with them. And what ends up happening is, of course, Oden is part of the crew, and then they find out that somehow Inarashi and Nekomamushi had managed to stow away on the ship, and they were waiting for Oden to be allowed to join before they themselves revealed themselves. It was like, so you've been hiding on the ship for 3 days. You were a giant cat and dog, and no one noticed you. Okay, I guess, whatever, okay. It's just meant to be funny. It's just like, how did they get here? I don't know. They were here. And basically what ends up happening is at this point in time, Oden, as everything is going on, well, they're out in this journey because he had the logbook with him, because he took the logbook with him somehow all the time. And it survived being in the water for 3 days. Reasons. The Deus Ex Machina reasons for why the book survived being in the water for 3 days. Being in seawater for 3 days. But he has his journal, and, like, as everything is happening, he's, like, writing about it in his journal and everything. And what ends up happening is, of course, pretty shortly after he's part of the crew, he ends up, he's talking with Toki, and he finds out that, she's actually from, 830-something years ago in the past, or whatever it was when she was born, and that she's only, like, physically 20-something years old. But she has a devil fruit that allows her to travel forward in time. She has the Toki Toki no Mi, and she has been using that to jump forward in time, trying to make her way to Wano. Because there's something important in Wano that she needs to do, or that she needs to find. Technically, we haven't figured out what that is yet, but it's probably something to do with Joy Boy and the ancient weapons and that type of a thing. So that'll probably get revealed when we get, the Void Century flashback, and we'll see, a younger Toki. Or see her set out on her, time-traveling journey. And so Oden and Toki are talking, and they're, just having this nice time and getting the chance to know each other. And we see Marco and Jozu, and I think some of the others, off to the side, watching them, aren't they so sweet together, which is just adorable. And that's, they ship Oden and Toki, and they're right. So there's that. But what ends up happening is, of course, Toki is just well, I am still trying to get to Wano, but I also just feel like it's a good thing for me to be with you now. And she's not wrong. And eventually what ends up happening is, Oden gets his own bounty, and he becomes very notorious and everything. And, his bounty is, like, spread all over the world. And, like, we know that, Buggy and Shanks and Roger read about it in the paper and everything like that. And so all of that stuff is happening. And then what ends up happening is, Toki and Oden fall in love. And, like, Toki is, of course, part of this traveling around and everything like that, and going to all of these different amazing and fascinating islands and everything like that. And Oden is just having fun, just, like, running headlong into adventure at each island that they come to, and just, like, fighting any Marines or any pirates or whatever that they come across. And he's just enjoying it so much and having such a fun time. Which, I mean, yeah, that would be fun too. And eventually what ends up happening is, Oden and Toki get married, and then about 28 years ago is when Momonosuke is born. And he is born on the Moby Dick. And, Oden is so happy and proud, and he's like, I have Momonosuke, and, I have my son, I have his son and everything. And, so, Momonosuke kind of grows up being on the has his first 2 years, a little bit more, on the Moby Dick. And so he gets to, he has Whitebeard there, and, Marco, and, all the other ones that are all there. And, like, at this point in time, Izo is very much getting along with the rest of the Whitebeard pirates, and has, warmed up to Whitebeard a bit more, and everything. So all of that stuff is happening. And then 26 years ago, or sometime between when Momonosuke is born and when Hiyori is born, what ends up happening is Whitebeard decides that his crew is growing so big in numbers that he's going to split it into 5 different divisions. And he ends up he appoints Oden as the commander of the 2nd division. Which, of course, much, much later on, 20-something years later, is, of course, the position that Ace will hold. And, Ace will have. Once he's part of the part of the Whitebeard pirates. And so, and Oden takes it, and he takes it in stride and everything. So, they're all still sailing around together. He's still sailing around with, Whitebeard and everything. And, sometime after that is when, 26 years ago is when Hiyori is born. And, she's, adorable and perfect. And then, like, I don't even think Hiyori is, like, 6 months old by the time everything happens with the Whitebeard pirates interacting with the Roger pirates. I don't even think she's that old. She might even only be, like, 4 months old or something like that by the time that happens. Because it's, like, she's born, and then that happens. And she is, like, little tiny baby when we see Roger holding her later on. But what happens is, at one point in time... the Whitebeard pirates come across this island, and they see that, Whitebeard sees that there's, the Oro Jackson, Roger's ship is there. And Oden is just, running headlong in to go and try to fight the Roger pirates. And because they haven't really come across any other crews at this point in time who are actually kind of, like, on a semi-friendly basis with the Whitebeard pirates, because, like, the Karma that they first interacted with, he was an enemy, and, like, they've interacted with other pirates that are probably an enemy crew, for all we know, just given everywhere that they were sailing all over the world. There is a chance that they may have run into either Big Mom's crew or, like, a very rudimentary version of, like, Kaido's crew at that point in time. Or run into Shiki, or run into someone else who is also former members of the Rocks Pirates. But, the way that we see with Oden here, just, like, charging in to go and fight, he doesn't realize that the Roger pirates aren't necessarily their enemies. They're a rival crew, yes, but they're kind of more like a friendly rival crew, as opposed to, like, oh, these ones are actually going to try to kill us if we fight them, as opposed to, like, the Roger pirates, where it's just like, yeah, they're not really our, full-on allies, but they're not our enemies. They're, like, our friends and rivals. And we don't want to hurt each other necessarily. We just kind of want to, test our strength against each other, which is what ends up happening. But, like, Oden just runs headlong into this. And he comes into contact with Roger. And this is where, Roger uses his Kamusari on on Oden, and Oden just gets flung back into a tree, and then of course this results in Oden and Roger and Whitebeard clashing, and of course they have like the battle for 3 days on this island, for 3 days and 3 nights, with the crews fighting against each other. And probably Toki is just, like, sitting on the ship with, like, little Momonosuke and little Hiyori, like, 2-year-old Momo and, a couple of month-old Hiyori, as she's watching all of this happen as they fight, and everything. And after 3 days or so, then it just kind of stops. And, they have a ceasefire. And then on the 4th day, they just have, like, this big, big party that they have where it's, kind of, like, exchanging of, like, stuff and information and different things like that. Just all talking and having fun and everything. And this is where we have it that Roger, talking with, Oden and Whitebeard, brings up the poneglyphs. He, like, brings the poneglyphs up to, he's got, like, the poneglyph rubbings from, like, Big Mom and stuff. And other poneglyphs that they've come across. And he's, like, showing them to Whitebeard. And Whitebeard is like, well, those are kind of interesting, but I have no idea what they are. And, Roger's kind of talking. He's like, he knows that they're kind of important because he has his voice of all things. That is kind of like, these things are telling, these things tell me that they're important, but they can't tell me exactly what they say. But I know that they're important. And Oden's like, I know what those say. I know how to read that language. It's been passed down in my family for, like, generations. And Roger is just like, wait a second, you could read this? And everything. And basically one thing leads to another with this conversation. And, Roger says something that, like, just, Whitebeard finds as ridiculous and Oden is just kind of inspired by. And what ends up happening is, of course, basically this leads to where Roger begs Oden and Whitebeard to allow Roger to basically rent Oden for a year and have Oden be on the Roger Pirates for a year, so that way he can come with them and they can find all the different poneglyphs, specifically the road poneglyphs, and read them, and then they can find where it's trying to lead them to. And Whitebeard is not happy about this. He does not like this idea. He doesn't want to, part ways with Oden because him and Oden are kind of, brothers in arms at this point in time. And Oden was kind of interested in the idea because he's like, well, I've heard about these poneglyphs all my life and everything, and, this language and everything like that, and I've been taught how to read it, and it's been passed down in my family, and I guess I would kind of like to know why. Also, I would assume Oden maybe went and, like, asked Toki about it, and maybe Toki's like, yeah, I know about the poneglyphs. I don't know where they are, but I know about them. And yeah, I'd be fine with going with you to go and find them. And so Oden joins Roger's crew for a short amount of time, for, the next year or so. And, Roger gives Whitebeard a bunch of gold and everything like that for this. And, Whitebeard is just, like, pouting and sulking off in the corner as they're leaving. And then the Roger Pirates are introduced to, Oden and his wife and his children. And Roger and Rayleigh are pretty happy pretty quickly right off the bat. And, they've got, this is where we go, like, it's been a long time since we've had babies on the crew. Shakes off in the corner. And what ends up happening is, so it's like, they're welcomed onto the crew, or at least by Roger and Rayleigh they are, by the rest of the crew, by Shanks and Buggy and most of the others. It's kind of hostile at that point in time because they don't know exactly why Roger decided to do this, and, like, they don't really know. Like, yeah, they kind of think it's interesting that now they have this, Wano samurai on their crew, but they don't know, like, they don't really know him that well. And Oden kind of ends up smoothing this over because what ends up happening is, like, and they show this in the anime, and it's funny if it's just filler that they show in the anime, but I'll take it. When they're in Mocktown, when they're running around in Mocktown, they end up getting a whole bunch of the, food supplies, and Oden just makes this giant pot of Oden for everybody on the crew to have, and that kind of, like, helps the crew warm up to him, and they're all just, like, they're much happier now. That they're much more accepting of Oden and Toki and Momonosuke and Hiyori. Like, we get, cute things of, like, I am quite certain that, like, Shanks and Buggy adored getting to play with, like, Momonosuke and Hiyori and everything like that. Help take care of them. and all of that. And we see Roger and Oden getting along really well, and, you know, different things like that. And eventually Oden does learn about Roger's illness and everything. And, you know, and as they're sailing, they end up making their way, you know, they use the knock-up stream to get up to, you know, Skypiea, where they end up, you know, where Gonfall, you know, kind of shows them where the bell is, and they read the poneglyph there. And, you know, Roger, you know, has Oden etch in a message into the Shandorian golden belfry bell frame around the poneglyph there. And then, of course, they end up making their way somewhere else. I don't think they ever end up going to Alabasta, simply because of the fact of, like, A, that's never shown, B, it's never mentioned that Whitebeard somehow found his way into Alabasta. Because that would have been a feat in and of itself. Because it's one thing to take the knock-up stream because, like, oh, well, let's go to Skypiea. This seems interesting. Alabasta is a sovereign nation that is aligned with the world government at that point in time. And while Cobra would either be king at this point in time, or Cobra's father would have been king at this point in time, I don't think that they would have welcomed the Roger pirates into Alabasta. I don't think that that would have happened necessarily. And, you know, so there's that whole thing there where it's just like, okay, well, they probably never got to that poneglyph. So that's like, they found out, you know, Luffy and the others know about their Robin at the very least knows about that poneglyph, but like the others, but like, you know, Roger and Oden didn't. But it wasn't a broad poneglyph, so it's not like it's needed for them to find their way to Laugh-Tale. And of course, as they're sailing around, eventually they end up landing in Water 7, where they see Tom, and, you know, everything happens there. You know, Oden gets to meet Tom, and then he also gets to meet Frankie, you know, little Cuddy Flam and everything, that he kind of invites to join the crew. And then Frankie just, like, you know, Frankie version of flipping him off, which is just going back to, like, working on his, you know, battle Frankies at that point in time. From there, they sail all the way down to Fishman Island, where they end up interacting with Neptune, where they meet Neptune. Well, Roger and Neptune have met previously, but now they're down there anyway. Plus, this is also kind of when Roger and Oden, who both have the voice of all things, hear all of the Sea Kings talking about Poseidon and about, you know, the next one, and about, you know, it'll happen soon and all of that type of stuff. And where they get to hear kind of the prophecy from Charlie, where she's like, you know, there will be a mermaid princess born in the next, like, 10 years, and it'll take 16 years for her to mature and everything else like that. And, you know, predicting, you know, the, you know, Neptune and Otohime together and everything. So it's like, it's some of that stuff where it's just, you know, Oden is kind of like witnessing some of this stuff. From there, it ends up being that sometime after that, you know, it's like, and they read the road poneglyph and the letter that's there. And I'm assuming that the only reason that Neptune knows about what is written on the other poneglyph, not the red poneglyph that was at Fishman Island, but the other one that's still currently there in the seabed forest. I'm assuming the reason he knows what it says is because Oden told him what was written there, what was written on the poneglyph. I mean, it's possible that it was, like, passed down, that the knowledge of, like, it was an apology letter was passed down, but having it be that, like, Odin's the one that read it to him makes sense. So it's like, that's how Neptune knows about it when he talks to Robin about it much, much later on, you know, when the Straw Hats are in Fishman Island. And what ends up happening is, of course, after that, Toki unfortunately becomes very sick. And because they're semi-close enough to Wano, they decide to take her to Wano to drop her and the children off. And Oden sees, you know, the other scabbards then and everything like that. And they're all just like, where have you been? Why have you been gone for so long? Blah, 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 blah. And he's just like, hi, this is my wife. These are my two children. This is my wife, Toki. My children, Momonosuke, Hiyori. They're very cute. Please take care of them. I have to go sneak into my father's castle. And, you know, and Oden must have known about the road poneglyph way underneath the flower capital. And by this point in time, we know that the switch has happened between Orochi and between Higurashi and, you know, Sukiyake as pretending to be Sukiyaki. And then, of course, that means that, you know, Orochi is kind of in power at this point in time, because we see that the different, or the weapons factories and everything like that are already being built in the background. And what ends up happening is, Oden makes his way to the flower capital, doesn't realize his father's not in control of the country anymore, gets his way to the other poneglyphs, specifically the road poneglyph, reads that, and then, gets a rubbing and then reads it, whatever, and then takes it all the way back to the Roger pirates, and then they leave with, the scabbards yelling at them in the background. From there, they also end up then going to Zou, because Inuarashi and Nekomamushi are like, hey, yeah, we know about one of those giant big red poneglyphs. Those are what you're looking for. Yeah, we know about one of those. Those are on our, one of them's on Zou. And Oden's just like, you couldn't have told me that before. You never mentioned that before. So they then head to Zou, where, they interact, because Inuarashi and Nekomamushi stayed on Wano with everybody else to help take care of Toki and the kids, because they're the ones that are very familiar with Toki and the kids, and the other scabbards are not. And it would be very jarring just to leave Toki there without having anyone who is kind of familiar with her there to help her. So Inuarashi and Nekomamushi stay there. And they also give a letter to Oden and Roger, so that way they can give it to whoever the current duke of the island is, which is the giant sheep guy or whatever. In the flashback, and they give him that, and Oden and Roger kind of interact with little adorable little Pedro. And they read the poneglyph, and while they're there, Oden hears his voice of all things hears Zunesha kind of trying to talk to him, but he doesn't want to interact with Zunesha at that point in time. And, they get all the, they put all the 4 road poneglyphs together, and then, of course, all of the crew, minus Shanks and Buggy, who stay on whatever island because Buggy is sick and Shanks takes care of him, they then head off to Laugh-Tale, or at least the island that will become known as Laugh-Tale. They get there, and we see, and then it's called Laugh-Tale because, or it's named Laugh-Tale by Roger because he, Oden gets there, they all get there, and then they get to wherever it is that, all of the ancient history or whatever for the Void Century is, written down. And Oden reads it to them. And something about it is just such a funny part of the tale, or something like that, that Roger and the rest of the crew just start laughing their asses off because it's just so funny as to what happened. We don't know exactly what the punchline is yet. We still got a while to go before we learn what the punchline is. But they just start laughing and laughing and laughing. And they dub the place and they dub the island Laugh-Tale. And then from there is that because Roger's health is greatly declining, he decides that he is going to disband the crew. And Roger is the first one that leaves, and we see all of them just weeping and everything as Roger is leaving, even though in the journal Oden says, and none of us cried a single tear. And then we just cut back to the memory. It's just everybody's just got tears pouring down their face as they're saying goodbye to Roger, which is fair because they know that their captain's leaving them. In the case of Shanks and Buggy, their father figure is kind of leaving them. Rayleigh, his best friends, are leaving him. This man who has meant so much to all of the people of the Roger Pirates, is leaving. And they all know that he's, very sick and probably going to die, within the next year. And Roger goes off and does, everything with Rouge and then hands himself in and blah, 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 blah. And then I think it's Oden is the next person that they drop off after they've dropped off, after they've dropped off Roger. And Oden's intention is to, once he gets back to Wano, he is going to go and, he's going to make his vision a reality of trying to open up Wano to the outside world because of what he learned on Laugh-Tale. He wants to get Wano ready to welcome Joy Boy. And his intention is to, you know, go and become shogun and then try to figure out how to open up Wano. Now, and I'll be going into this in the next video, but obviously at this point in time, he does not know that his father has supposedly died and that Orochi is now shogun, and that, you know, Kaido is there and everything else. Roger is not quite aware of all of this yet. He, you know, like, Kinemon and the others kind of tried to talk to Oden. I'll get to the right name of the badass old guy. Tried to talk to Oden about what was going on, but Oden didn't want to listen to them. Because he just wanted to get in, get out, and leave Wano again so he could go and finish this promise that he made to Roger to help them get to, you know, where the road poneglyphs lead. Brenda, what are you doing? Pretty girl. And so basically what ends up happening is, of course, you know, Oden is now on his way back to Wano with the intention of, you know, becoming shogun, of taking very seriously his role of shogun, because he needs to use that position in order to try to open the land of Wano, so that way it is ready for when Joy Boy shows up. As we will discuss in the next video, and as we all know, that doesn't go as well as planned. So, yeah. So that's what I have for this one. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.